Good morning, everyone, and welcome back. This is going to be session 3 out of 47. We are here for Dare to be Great 3, Dare to be Great 2021. This is going to be awesome. We have so many good speakers coming on today and the rest of the week. So we are so happy to have you all here with us. And, as always, big props to the sponsors for sponsoring. Sponsoring this virtual conference. They're going to be doing several sessions tomorrow in different tiers, so look out for that. But I am very excited for this session. We've got here Megan Hamilton, and she's with the Decatur County Communications out of Indiana, and she's going to be presenting on a session called Stop Expecting You from Everyone. Thank you so much for being here, and have at it. It's all you.
All right. Thank you. So I am, like you said, Megan. I've been a dispatcher. My 5-year anniversary is actually in a couple weeks in July. I was a supervisor for 2 years, and I won the Wendy Day Memorial Scholarship and attended the 911 Nina Goes to Washington. And I have to say, it changed my life. Really, I met wonderful people. I did wonderful things, and it was amazing. I was on Within the Trenches podcast to talk about the scholarship. And obviously, with my shirt, you can see I'm a 911 Wonder woman. Sorry. And I have 3 kids. Colton's 9, Clara is 7, and Grayson is 3. It's just me and the kids. Here's a couple pictures. If I can get my slides to go. My wonderful time at Nina 911 Goes to Washington, and of course my babies. I got into dispatching on accident. Like Amy found an ad in the paper. I actually was a cake decorator and a food service manager at Kroger. And I knew a supervisor that worked with Decatur County, and she was like, hey, posted on her Facebook. She was like, I think you'd be into this. And I applied, and I just never looked back. It was my first day, actually. I witnessed 2 senior dispatchers work a CPR on a girl that had been struck by lightning in the middle of a rainstorm. And it hooked me. I was hooked, and I never looked back. I've been in this for 5 years, and it's been my longest relationship to date. Is mine with the 911 industry. So expecting you from someone, every day we hold ourselves to a standard that comes from our personal choices, our values, our beliefs, and we can make the mistake of holding other people to the standard that we hold ourselves, and we face disappointment because not everyone can reach the standard that you hold yourself to, and you're going to face disappointment if you're holding yourself and others to the same standard. We can't change others' personal expectations, but we can modify our expectations to meet the abilities of others. And what I mean by that is I'm not asking you to change your expectations, but I'm asking you to be flexible. Modify timelines, modify exactly what you're asking that person to do, because at the end of the day, maybe they're not capable of doing everything in a way that you're capable. So I'm big on talking about your plate. I feel like everyone is handed this plate of, pardon my French, just bullshit that we deal with every single day. And you carry your responsibilities on it, you carry your stressors on it, but everyone has a different size plate. I may come with a huge family function paper plate ready to load my responsibilities, and the person next to me may come with a dessert plate. And if I'm piling on expectations, responsibilities on that person's plate, eventually their plate's going to collapse. And at the end of the day, we don't want anyone else's plate to collapse. So adjust your expectations to what a person can carry on their plate. You have to take in consideration that you might have a bigger plate than them, and you can't pile. Unless you're at the China buffet, you can pile your plate there. But when we talk about responsibilities, you don't want to pile your plate too high because you don't want to face that plate collapse. You don't want to change your core expectations, but you can change your timeline of expectations. So what I mean by that is you can't expect everyone to manage tasks in a way that you see fit, but you can modify your timeline to match what others can juggle. And that just means taking time to really sit with someone and understand where they're coming from, because at the end of the day, maybe they're coming from a place where they haven't carried a load of responsibilities. And in the 911 industry, we carry a huge burden on our shoulders. Every day, every call that we take, we have that burden of responsibility. And we have to learn to help people juggle that responsibility because we don't just take calls every day. I know at my agency, we also enter warrants and we handle everything that has to do with warrants, locates, everything that has to do with warrants, we handle. And I've seen where dispatchers struggle with warrant interest with warrant entry. And when you're juggling admin calls and 911 calls, and now I've walked in the center, I've handed you 3 warrants that I expect entered in a timely manner. And then to add to that, you have officers banging on the door, hey, who do we have warrants on? Can we go get them? And instead of just letting that person drown, because at the end of the day, you can carry that responsibility and you can enter those warrants, maybe realize that the person that you're asking to do this isn't as fast as you as warrant entry, and they're not as fast as you as picking up those phone calls. So move it to a time where we know that there's dead spots in our shifts where we're not getting a lot of busy. Maybe say, hey, listen, I know right now between 12 and 4, we're super busy, but between 4 and 6, maybe we're not so busy. So let's focus on getting these warrant entered at 4 and 6, and then focus on call taking between 12 and 4. So are you expecting too much? This is big. This is big for me. I struggled with it myself when I was a dispatcher on the floor, and I struggled with it when I became a supervisor and a CTO and I started training. There's a huge difference between personal expectations and what expectations your center should hold every single day. So expectations are personal when they're based on goals for growth and professionalism personally. Your center expectations should always be backed and based on policy and procedure. So I have dispatchers who roll in the door 20 minutes early. They're making coffee for their shift partners. They're cleaning the consoles. And every day I know that's going to happen. Every day if they're relieving me, I know they're going to be a half hour to 20 minutes early. I know that. And I have grown to expect that from them, even though I shouldn't. Excuse me. Allergies have gotten to me. So when I expect that from them and that doesn't happen, then there's that little line of disappointment at the end of the day. And you don't ever want to be disappointed with someone you're working next to on the console. Center expectations would be showing up in uniform, showing up on time, working your entire shift from start to finish, and following all the proper procedures for call taking. That's kind of, to me, that it seems like a no-brainer, like, oh, those are differences. But, I've had dispatchers who we don't like the new dispatcher. And you're like, well, why don't you like the new dispatcher? Well, she rolls in here 60 seconds before her shift's due. Well, at the end of the day, she's following proper procedure. She's in the door 60 seconds before her shift starts. If her shift starts at 6 p.m., she's there at 6 p.m. You can't hold her to another expectation of being there early just because you yourself show up early every single day. That's personal. That's nothing that she can control. And we had a dispatcher and we just don't like the new dispatcher. We don't trust the new dispatcher. And it was, well, what are your reasons? And they were all personal reasons. She shows up. She doesn't come in and ask us what she can do to help us. She doesn't volunteer to put warrants in. She doesn't volunteer to sit at station 1 where IDEX is. Those are all personal expectations. Now, had they said, she shows up in leggings and a t-shirt. She doesn't wear the uniform. She shows up at 6:05 when her shift starts at 6 o'clock. If she shows up and she leaves early, those are issues that as a supervisor, you can, I'm reading some of the comments. Everyone liked my dessert plate. But as a supervisor, you can actually do something about them. And coming in early and taking over a console is an expectation for you, but it's wrong to hold others to the same standard. While it's permissible to hold them to a high standard, your expectations must match your policy and procedure. So at the first of the day, when you sit down to write your policy and procedure, you need to take in consideration, you need to take a step back and make sure your goals aren't personal expectations. They're center-based expectations that are going to help you run a successful center. That's what we want at the end of the day. Customer service is huge for me. I'm probably going to spend the most on customer service. Um, I feel like you have very different expectations when it comes to customer service. Basic policy backed expectations would be refraining from rude language. That's an obvious one. Using repetitive directions versus demands, not yelling at callers, and your policy aligning with your principles, or are you expecting you? So when I first started dispatching, I came from a job where I did nothing but customer service, and my job as food service manager was to make people happy at the end of the day. No matter what it was, no matter if the customers were in the wrong, it was my job to make them happy. So I brought that in with me when I came into dispatching, and I took it as I need to make every caller happy at the end of this call, and I need to treat them the way that I would want my own mother to be treated when she called in the 911 center. And I took that to heart. But I noticed that other people around me weren't treating callers like how I would want them to treat my mother. And, they were yelling at callers, and they were making demands, and they were being rude. And it was just, at the end of the day, exhausting to be around. And at the end of the day, you have to take in outside factors. Bad customer service usually comes from burnout and fatigue. You get those seasoned dispatchers in, and they've been there for 15 to 20 years, and they're exhausted and they're burnt out, and their customer service is not going to be the same as me, a fresh-faced 5-year dispatcher. It's not going to happen. But you can have policy and procedure in place to make sure those things don't go to the extreme. Taking consideration outside sources and what you can fix or train out. There's a lot of training out there that you can do customer service wise. I know I've taken customer service classes, and it's funny to refer to callers as customers, but I've always weirdly viewed things as transactions, and they call in the center, they tell me what they need, I give them what they need, and it's a transaction. It's weird, I know, but I come from food service manager background where everything was a transaction. Some more customer service stuff. I have some examples here. We want every caller to be treated with respect, but we can't force our dispatchers to do something out of their comfort or their abilities. So dispatcher 1 uses a dry monotone voice with every call, and callers take it as uncaring or non-emergent. We have dispatchers, and I've worked with dispatchers where nothing is an emergency. And to guys on the road, that may be nice for them because they're not yelling into the radio every time we have a call. That may be nice for them. But to callers, when you're taking that call and you're just, 911, where's your emergency? Your husband's been beating you. Let me start an officer your direction. What's your address? You kind of feel like they don't care at the end of the day. They don't care that you're going through this, because when you call into a 911 center, you're probably experiencing the worst day of your life or a bad day. And it's one of those things that are terrifying I've had to call in 911, and it's terrifying, and you want someone on the end of the line that's caring. But at the same time, we can't force dispatchers to change their voices to show care and responsibility. Dispatcher 2 used a loud booming voice to take control of a situation that can be heard from rooms away. We all know this dispatcher. We know them well. Every call is emergent. Every call gets put out on the radio really loud. Every call is answered really loud. We all know this dispatcher. And while they're not breaking policy and procedure, it can be exhausting to work with that in a room. If there's only 2 people in the room and they're taking a parking violation call and they're screaming it out over the radio, that can be exhausting. And that's when you want them to change and you want them to do things differently. But at the end of the day, that's expecting you from other people. That's not expecting them to follow procedure and policy. Dispatcher 3 refers to all callers as sweetie and tends to stay on the line with callers till the responders arrive, calming nerves. While this seems like it would be wonderful, and to callers, it probably is wonderful, but when you're working 3 people in a dispatch room and the calls are coming in and they're staying on the line and all it is a lift assist and they're staying online with a little old granny, it can be exhausting when you're busy. But that's another expecting you from other people. Not everyone is going to handle the call the way you want it to be handled, but they're not really breaking policy and procedure to handle it. They're doing the calls, and that's an example of treating the calls as you want to be treated. None of these dispatchers are breaking policy. You may not agree with how they are handling things and want to step in and change how they take a call. Remember, at the end of the day, no one handles the call the same, and we must acknowledge that. So, what I mean by that is, in my center, we have PowerPhone on the computer, and it step by step walks us through questions that we need to be asking, directions that we need to be giving, and that's where policy and procedure has stepped in, put a system in place. This is what all dispatchers follow. So you have dispatchers who come in, use PowerPhone, and then they get off the call. They're done. Then you have other dispatchers who stay on the line asking extra questions, getting more information for first responders, and working to calm down callers and get them in a position where they can end the call and feel comfortable with waiting on first responders to arrive. So I am one of those. It's a really bad habit of mine that I stay on the line with callers longer than I should, just because I don't want to end a phone call and them not feel like they were ready to get off the phone with me. Them not feel like, okay, she got me through it. I can wait for the fire department and EMS to arrive now. I have that bad habit. So when I see other people in the room ask the PowerPhone questions, age, what's wrong with the patient, and give them directions for what they need to do until EMS arrives. Pre-arrivals is what it's called. I couldn't think of that word. When I see someone just do the bare minimum, I get frustrated. But at the end of the day, I have to stop myself. And I have to say, not everyone is going to handle the call like I'm going to handle the call. Addressing shortcomings in the center. So I am very sensitive to calls involving children. I lost a son at 18 weeks during pregnancy, and I went into my interview, and that was, I think the third thing I said to them is, if I get a call where a child is injured, it's going to be hard for me to get through that call. And about a year and a half into my dispatching career, I took an unresponsive 15-month-old who didn't make it. And my boss showed up at my house. Every single dispatcher I worked with reached out to me on the phone. Everyone, the sheriff came in to check on me. The coroner came in to check on me because I made it clear that I had this shortcoming. I had this shortfall that was going to affect my career, or things with children, which a lot of people are affected by things with children. But how can you address shortcomings without stepping on a line if your dispatchers don't even know they have shortcomings? They don't even know they have shortfalls that are affecting their career. The first step is to address it and to familiarize yourself with your policy and procedure. You want to make sure you are not stepping on any toes when you address this shortfall with them. You want to stop and verify that what you're addressing isn't outside the realm of your policy. And what I mean by that is, you don't want to be trying to retrain a dispatcher on how to handle something if you don't have a policy in place that clearly states they're falling short. Not everyone is going to handle a call the way you want it handled. We know this already because I've said it multiple times. But are you asking a dispatcher to take on too much because you're expecting you? So dispatcher number one goes silent when they're online with suicidal callers. They don't fill the dead air with questions or comfort. Instead, they freeze. How can you step in without overstepping the line? In this situation, this is a training issue. This isn't an expecting you from other people. This is 100% training. There are tons of trainings out there where they teach you how to handle a suicidal caller class. I've taken 2 or 3 of them myself because mental health is something I've struggled with my entire life, and I want to be stronger in that area. So I would find calls for them to make them feel more prepared, because the more classes you take and the more prepared you are for a situation, then you're ready to tackle that. You have the confidence in you because you've been trained. So dispatcher number one is 100% falling short because we have in our policy when we have suicidal caller policies, and we have questions and we have things to say. We don't disconnect, but that means you have to fill that dead air with something. And dispatcher 2 seems really cold on the phone with domestic callers. This is similar to what we discussed earlier. They don't break policy in any way, but you don't like the way they handle the call. In this situation, you're expecting you rather than a policy to follow. The situation here isn't that your dispatcher hasn't been trained to handle domestic calls. It's just your dispatcher probably has never been in a domestic violence situation. They've never had family in a domestic violence situation. They just, oh, well, this is Joe and John Doe fighting again, and they're just exhausted of dealing with it. And yes, you can train them to be kinder, and you can train them to ask more questions and to stay on the line with callers. But at the end of the day, if they're going to be cold on the phone, then they're going to be cold on the phone. I'm seeing a lot of comments about taking suicidal callers. I know with our Power Phone program, we have a mental health. We actually have a mental health crisis call type that Power Phone pushes through, and they ask questions. So they aren't, if you type in suicidal callers in my call screen, you're not going to get a Power Phone that's going to walk you through. So you have to go with your gut. And for someone who hasn't, if you haven't ever dealt with mental health and you haven't ever dealt with depression, then you can't put yourself in that person's shoes and know what questions to ask. That's why you need to send these dispatchers to training to handle calls with mental health. Mental health is a huge issue, especially right now. We're coming out of the COVID crisis, and we're coming out of a spot where everyone is told to stay home and forced to stay indoors. And, a lot of people are struggling with their mental health right now. I know I'm struggling with my mental health right now, so I know others are. And while that makes me a more caring and calming dispatcher, not everyone is going to have that. And you need to train. So this is my favorite quote. You don't rise to the occasion, you sink to the level of your training. Whenever you take a call, you're never ever going to rise to the occasion. You're never ever going to be a hero. You're always going to sink to the bare minimum training. And I know that some centers right now are doing no training, which is terrifying. That's why it is awesome that there is viral training going on and there's online training going, and we're doing things like Dare to Be Great, and we're doing all of these online courses because we can never stop training. There's never going to be a point in my career that I feel overtrained to do this job, because every single call that we take is 100% different day in, day out. Where there is a complaint, there is a class to correct it. There are companies out there designed to train your dispatchers to the highest level of success. All you have to do is take advantage of it. And I know that there's been a lot of free training going on right now. Dare to Be Great obviously doesn't cost anything. 911 Wonder Women does workshops. There's tons of training out there. And I actually have Dispatch Lab, APCO, Nino, Nina, not Nino, the Healthy Dispatcher, Power Phone, 911 Training Institute. That's a drop in the water. That is just a touch of what having at your finger point. There's fingertips. Sorry. I get so fired up about training. I think that at the end of the day, a lot of people are like, you can't fix stupid, but you can train it to be better. At the end of the day, you can always train someone to be better than they are, better than they've ever been before. So this went a lot faster than I expected it to go. It did not go this fast when I practiced it, but I wanted to take a second and talk about a lot of those things that I've talked about in this have been a supervisor standpoint, because I was a supervisor for 2 years, but I have to talk about expecting you from other people when you're just a run-of-the-mill dispatcher. You don't want to be a supervisor. You don't want to be a director. You just want to be a dispatcher because that's where your passion is. That's where it lies. And you still can struggle with expecting you from other people. And I want to take a second and I want to leave the training so people can write it down. And I want to leave this up and I want to talk about it some more. I think that when I first came into dispatching, I had this glamorized image in my head of how dispatching was going to go and how working with other people was going to go. And then I got in the center, and like Amy talked about, you see the negative side of things. You see the mean girls, and you see the seasoned dispatchers that are out to eat the young. And it affects you. It's very easy to get a negative mentality and to go in and carry that burden on your shoulder. If no one wants me to be here, I don't even want to be here. I'm just here to take calls, and become that angry dispatcher that Adam 10 talks about. And you never want to do that. And, you know, when you come in and you let the negativity ride on you and you let the negativity take you over, at the end of the day, the person that's suffering is the caller. Because when they're calling in, they have no idea that your center is toxic. They think that glamorized picture in their head that I talked about of how a 911 center works and how police dispatching works and fire dispatching and EMS dispatching. They have this glamorized image in their head of how it goes. And at the end of the day, that's not how it works. But it's not a caller's job to bear that responsibility of your toxic center or your bad attitude. It's not their responsibility. So when you come into work and you're expecting everyone to handle the same thing, same things, the same way, you're just looking for trouble. At the end of the day, that's all it is you're looking for trouble, because you're going to be overwhelmed and you're going to be tired and you're going to nitpick every single call the person next to you is taking. And at the end of the day, you're not responsible for the person next to you. You're responsible for you. While you're a team in the center and you're a team on the radio, the way a person handles a call is never your responsibility unless you're a supervisor or a director or a manager who is tasked with that responsibility. But a 911 dispatcher can't carry the burden of expecting everyone to be like them. Sorry that my session's gone so short here. I just want to, again, I'm a firm believer in holding a bottom line expectation in the comm center. But I also know at the end of the day, if your policies and procedures don't match your expectations, you're wasting everyone's time. So it starts with having good policy and procedure in place. And even as a dispatcher, you should be familiar with your policy and procedure. You should know how your center is expecting you to handle every single call. You should be familiar with that. If you haven't read your policy and procedure book, I'm deeply concerned. I know our boss sent it out to us and she was like, you need to familiarize yourself with this. These are our expectations, because you're going to get yourself in trouble. I have some tips. At the end of the day, you don't want to assign anyone more than they can handle on their plate. I'm going to reiterate, because I know a couple people talked about missing it. I talked about plates and how I come to work with, as supervisor, I came to work with a buffet style plate, and the person on the console next to me who is just dispatching may have come into work that day with a dessert plate. And now I'm piling all these responsibilities on a tiny little dessert plate that's meant to hold a piece of cake. And that's rough for a lot of people. You do want to sign dispatchers up for trainings to accommodate fears and shortcomings. I know the big issue is a lot of people come into the center and they think, I can do this. I've been trained. I did my training course. I know in my center, I believe we have 12 hours of required training every year that we have to accomplish. And it's training of our choosing, which is amazing that our center offers that. But she requires 12 hours. There's a lot of courses that she requires us to take and go to. But at the end of the day, our 12 hours that are required are kind of a free roam. You do what you need to do. And not every center has this. Not every center is equipped to send 15 dispatchers to 12 hours of training sponsored. They just can't. They don't have it in their budget. And that's why, if you're expecting other people to do better, then you need to expect yourself to do better. And you need to go to these trainings that are free. There's so much free training out there. There are so many people that just want you to be your best dispatcher. They want you to be your best you. And you have to take advantage of it. And you have to let dispatchers take advantage of it as well. Don't expect perfection. No one is perfect. At the end of the day, no call is handled perfectly. You can go back and listen to the recording and find 2 to 3 mistakes that people are making in every call. Not terrible mistakes, silly mistakes. I don't mean like life or death mistakes. I'm talking little mistakes like, sometimes you get those callers and you refer to them as sir and they're a ma'am. That's a little mistake. We're not talking life or death mistakes like we took this call and we dispatched it to the wrong address. That's a big mistake. That's retraining that needs to happen. Do expect their best. There's a huge difference in expecting perfection and expecting someone's best. And at the end of the day, you always want to expect someone's best. You don't expect them to be perfect. And doing their best means that they've been trained thoroughly. They're day in, day out, they're arriving to work, ready to do the job that they've been handled. And if you don't have, and I know that some of you are listening to this and you're like, man, some of these, it isn't me expecting too much from people. It's not me expecting me from people. It's me expecting the bare minimum of people and I'm not getting that. Then you need to reevaluate your center and reevaluate the dispatchers you have in place. Because there's a huge difference in expecting you, which is your personal values, beliefs, and choices, versus expecting the bare minimum of just policy, procedure, and understanding. I think that's all I have. That ran a lot shorter than I expected it to. If Ricardo wants to jump back on with me. If you guys have any questions, let me.
So there is one question in here, but the question that popped in, it looks like someone, and I'm not sure if it was answered in the comments or not, but the question is there any training on how to handle shots fired officer down call? I recently had my first one, and it's been hard. Are there any, Megan, that you've taken? I know that Tony Harrison has one that he does.
I can't remember if it was Anita or if it was another one. I'll have to look for it and let Danielle know. I know that a lot of people in the comments are saying Justice Clearinghouse having great classes. That's been one that everyone's been really pushing through. I know that if I just simply got on the computer and searched up what my issue was, 911 dispatch training. And that led me down a rabbit hole of all these magnificent trainings. So if she wants to stop there, and I know if she's already had one and it's been really hard and she really needs to consider doing a debriefing with, or even just reaching out. Roxy's commenting if she needs a friend to listen to, even if she needs to reach out to me and talk it through. I've never taken an officer down call, but I've taken a class on how to handle it. And we do training at my center on how to handle it. And, her first step would be going to her director and reaching out and seeing what they can do to help her post taking that call, because that's a tough one.
Yeah, and everybody in the comments and everything, they're being very very supportive. I think that's one of the best things there is the support and the networking that comes out of virtual conferences like this.
Yeah.
This was an excellent session. There was so much information, and looks like another question popped in here. Let me go for this one here. It says, do you know of any trainings to help develop radio listening skills? One of my team needs help.
Radio listening skills. In my center, we actually play a lot of our recordings over and again, and during training, we kind of just make our own. Because everyone has an officer we have an officer that sounds like Mickey Mouse when he talks, when he gets really amped up. And he is one of those, when they're in training, I will play his traffic, because if he is amped up on the interstate, you don't understand what he's saying. And if you can understand our Mickey Mouse officer, then you can understand anyone. So in that case, I tend to make my own training in that. I don't think I've ever attended a course that was just designed for radio ears.
Excellent. Now, is there a way that the people can get a hold of you? You know, email, social media, or anything like
Yeah,
that?
I'll put in the comments. I can put my email address in right now, my personal email address, and I'll put in my cell. Anytime anyone needs to reach out and they feel like they're struggling, I'm always here to talk to. I mean, I think that this hit home for me. This has been a huge struggle of mine, of expecting so much out of those around me, and then it affecting and draining myself and draining my soul when it didn't need to.
Right, and that's something that I struggled with the same thing, first
Yeah.
starting out, and then even later on, becoming a supervisor and such. I remember
Hmm.
there were some times where we were so short staffed, like morale was down,
Yeah.
and I was the same thing, just like the name of your session. I was expecting others to be doing the same thing that I was doing, or how I would react, or
Yeah.
whichever, and it was killing me. So
Hmm.
some of those, I remember one meeting specifically, someone coming in, and we were talking about how our attitudes can impact and affect each other, and someone coming in saying, whatever other people are feeling, I'm not going to be affected by that. And I said, yeah,
Yeah.
you are. I said, if I come in, as a supervisor, if I come in and I am all happy, like, let's do this, you're gonna feel the same thing. You're gonna want to do it. But if
Yeah.
I come in
Exactly.
being all jerky and stuff, you're gonna feed off of that as well.
People
And
just, they tend to feed off each other. And we had, when we first consolidated, I came into Decatur County right after they consolidated, so there was a lot of that negative energy. And I am just very, like, if you read my 911 Wonder Women blogs, I'm a very positive person, and I rely on positivity in my life because I struggle with my mental health and I need that balance. And it got to the point where I had to look at seasoned dispatchers and say, I know you're upset about this. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to vent and 5 minutes to bitch, and then we're done for the day. Because I physically can't sit here and be drained by your negativity.
right, and that it ends up bleeding over into calls as
Yeah.
well. It might be a little thing here or there, but like you were saying, in your presentation, some of the tone and all. If somebody calls in, depending on how your tone is, the callers are going to feel that as well.
Yeah. And you're not going to be getting good information from your callers if you picked up that phone with a negative attitude. You're never going to get what you need out of that caller.
I like what you have here. I'm going to put this back in focus here a moment. So I have your PowerPoint back in focus here, because
Yeah.
this one of the points you have here in closing, the do sign up dispatchers for trainings and accommodate fears and shortcomings. I know a lot of us we were sent to different trainings, and one of the ones that I was sent to was for suicidal callers. And it was one that I remember talking to people about, saying that I wanted to learn more about it. I was really nervous to go to it, because I wasn't sure exactly how it was going to go down.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that they did sign us up and say, you have to go to this. you
Yeah.
you need to go to this, because it'll help you as well with these calls, and it definitely did. It definitely helped. But I love that you have that in there, and that everyone is here to see it and read it as well,
Yeah.
because it's important. It's an important fact there. Also, for those who are watching right now, whether you're watching live or you're watching in the replay, you can make contact further with Megan through our Discord channel for Dare
Yep.
to Be Great.
I'm
There's
on
a lot
Discord.
of people in there talking and everything already. So if you can add your email and stuff in there as well,
Oh, yeah,
and
definitely.
people can connect with you. So that is excellent.
Yep. They can always find me through my email or find me on the 911 Wonder Women group. You have to join it. I'm always on there. I'm always posting on there.
All right. Well, excellent. Thank you so very much for this important message
Oh,
and for
thank you for
being here,
having
for
me.
being a speaker. That has been excellent. And make sure if you get a chance, go back through, go into the comments. There is a lot of great feedback and just everyone just feeding off of everything that you're talking about. So again,
Yeah,
thank you so very much.
thank you.
So for everyone who is here right now, I'm going to bring everyone into the next session that's coming up. The session is going to be coming up at 11:15 a.m. Eastern Time, and it is going to be with Zachary Dykes, and he is out of the Missouri State Highway Patrol, and his session is called The Jaded Dispatcher: You, Burnout, and Burnout Mitigation Strategies. We'll see you here in a few.